Hi, I'm Jennifer Wild, and you're listening to Sober Exposure. If it's about recovery, we're gonna cover it. It's like one big therapy session, but it's free. So thanks for joining our dysfunctional family as we uncover recovery with Sober Exposure. Let's go. All right, welcome to Sober Exposure with me, Jennifer Wild. And man, I'm psyched for this one today. I'm always excited, but I just get, there's a special place in my heart for my artists, my creative souls, so to speak. And most addicts, we all are creative. We're brilliant people. We are. That's why I guess we just have to anesthetize ourselves because we're just too smart and too brilliant and too creative. And without further ado, I want to bring you Pop Buchanan. Pop, welcome to Sober Exposure. We're so happy to have you.
Thank
you have
you
such an
so
amazing
much.
story. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored, and I'm really excited to connect with another artist, another person that gets it. And it's always a good day to be in recovery. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I mean, you do not, you don't mess around when it comes to recovery. You take it real serious. And I want to talk about some of the different things that you do and some of the different approaches. I know you take a real holistic approach to recovery, and we'll get all into that. I know also I know you're a 12-stepper too, and you kind of incorporate a lot of different things. But tell me a little bit where it all began. Tell us about Baby Papa. How did it
Yeah.
start in New York?
Yeah. Baby pop. Well, it started like anything else, young kid. I lost my dad when I was about 13, and I was just exposed to the neighborhood, started smoking weed at 14, 15. I think the weed really did a number on me. I kind of like really that first high from the weed just totally zoned me out. It was like a magical experience I kept chasing. But weed never really was too problematic. Just in retrospect, I wish I didn't smoke so young because I felt like my life could have went many different ways. And weed kind of restricts people. And I'm not a big. I understand weed for harm reduction and it could be cool. But for me, it's just annoying. I never really enjoyed it. But I think my story evolves around my dad and loss. I love my dad. He was my best friend. My dad was a big, mighty figure in the calypso world. He was raised in a steel band. He was from St. Kitts. He was a popular tax accountant. He was a brilliant genius, popular in the neighborhood, had multiple offices. We just lived this very exciting life. My dad was a very exciting man, and he was a giant. So when he passed away, my life imploded, totally crumbled. I was crushed. And I was just a really normal, really good kid. We went to church. My family's Catholic. I had a brother that was training in the seminary who later
Mm.
became a Catholic priest. I was an altar boy. Music was always in my family, hence my dad being part of a steel band. My older cousin was already in hip hop. He was one of the hip hop pioneers. And long story short, Baby Pop just lost his dad. Was really sad. Fast forward from 13 to about 15 to 17. I'm dealing with weed, playing with beer here and there. And long story short, alcohol just never really it never really sat well with me. I always had problems with drinking from the moment I accidentally, or I guess intentionally, picked up a drink at a family event. Must have been about 16. I literally just totally lost it. I remember like totally getting drunk, embarrassing myself. And from that moment, it was a real indicator that maybe would have a problem with alcohol. And just the way my brain and body work, alcohol never really meshed well. And then I started getting into hip hop. I was a musician. So, being in the music industry, you're surround. It's all about, party, girls, bottles, just getting out there, smoking, that studio life. And I think I was extremely
Oh yeah.
exposed to it at a young age. And I was in this environment. Bottles was always available. I was able to do whatever I wanted. I had this freedom, and it was part of the persona. I'm Pop. I was really animated, energetic type kid playing that artist role. It kind of fit the theme. So addiction kind of suited me in that world. But because I was allergic, and because I had an allergy, and because alcohol was something I should have never had drank, it would eventually create innumerable problems in my life.
That's correct. And I say this all the time too, because I've heard so many stories. And I grew up in radio, and I grew up in the rock and roll world, which is very similar to the hip hop, the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll. And I've talked to so many musicians and so many artists. And there's a lot of other people that grew up in that world that don't turn out to be alcoholics and addicts if they don't have the predisposition, if they don't have that allergy, that spiritual modality that comes with addiction. So when you talk about how you had all of that in your environment, if you didn't have that, do you believe that you're born with it? That no matter what, even if you grew up in a library, that you would still become an alcoholic eventually?
Yeah, this is just the bottom line here is either you're allergic to it or you're not. Either you have issue with it or you don't. So, for example, my friends had the same exposure that I had. They didn't have the allergy, so they would be able to get up the next day and go about their business. They wouldn't re-drink or revisit it. Um, and it was progressive. The addiction was chronic, and it became very progressive. Meaning, throughout the years, you know, it became way more problematic. I became more chemically dependent. But here's the thing: it depends on triggers, right? Because I was kind of like just an animated, happy guy who would drink. It depends on what type of exposure. So for me, I had a partner. My partner was able to drink and he was able to party with me, but he didn't necessarily have the allergy. So after we left the studio, he was fine. But the point I was trying to make was that it got progressive throughout time. It got worse. And I think if you add triggers in, like some type of loss, so this is a mental health component to where your addiction could go from, let's just say, level 5 to level 100 really fast. And that's surrounding loss, grief, disappointment, some form of rejection, maybe trauma, any form of trauma, any type of loss or grief leads to trauma, and that could amplify the addiction. So in my case, I think that's what started to happen when I started. Go ahead.
No,
Oh,
yeah, I'm
okay.
thinking the loss of your father, of course. So I'm bringing it to me. I'm thinking of me because the first time I picked up a drink, I drank alcoholically. It I mean, it progressed to serious drugs, and I mean, I ended up a crackhead behind the dumpster smoking in some really sketchy places. But the first time I picked up, and I didn't have any trauma like a death of a parent, but my trauma was a little different, I guess you could say. I guess I was just drinking away just my anger of growing up the way I grew up, having to keep up with the Joneses. So I was just kind of relating. I was like, yeah, I guess I was drinking away my anger,
Right,
at
and it goes.
16.
Right. It goes both ways also. So when you're talking about there's a term called comorbid addiction. So it means you can have a dual diagnosis where the mental health components of depression, anxiety, or whatever the mental health aspect is could be fueling the addiction, or the addiction can be fueling the mental health aspect. So it's kind of like this catch-22 where you're stuck. So and on one hand, you have it where you could have been not had no loss or anything, but the nature of the addiction could have been creating depressive symptoms, trauma, the reality of your environment could have been pushing you to use more and falling deeper down the rabbit hole. In my case, the addiction was amplifying my depression and it was just feeding off of each other. So that's how that works. But the point I was trying to make is when I got to about, I think my whole world really, really imploded once I got a little older and I experienced a really bad breakup in combination with a series of other events like the real estate market crash. I was out of college. I was like making all this money and then things just didn't start working out. And then from there, my relationship started getting jeopardized and just, it was a series of events and I kept my default was I'm doing this music, I'm living this real estate lifestyle, and it's all surrounded by drinking and partying, but I still had this allergy to alcohol, so the addiction kept growing. It kept becoming more chronic.
And what kind of
And
music were you doing at that time? Certainly not the kind
I,
of music you're doing now.
I was always doing hip hop. I was always doing hip hop. I was
Well, yeah, hip hop, but now your message is, were you
yeah,
doing like the
well, I was always considered somewhat of a conscious artist, but I was just a little I was younger, so I was a lot more street with it. Like it was a lot more like shoot 'em up and whatever type, get it
Right, that's
however
what I
you
meant.
get it hip
Yeah.
hop. Right,
Right.
right. I was less aware
Mhm.
of the power of authenticity and not following trends and just following your inner voice and making music for the art and the love and the consciousness part of it. When you're young, you're conscious, but you're not as conscious. You're not super conscious, so to say, as you'll be when you get older and you have a little bit of world experience and life kicks you in the butt, right? But either way, I was always a good
Mhm.
artist. I just wasn't always a dedicated because the addiction will always pull me away from that. And I feel like I'm all over the place, but that's what the addiction felt like. It had me all over the place. So I just want to recap and reset the
Mhm.
conversation for everyone. So go from 13 years old, my dad passes away. I get exposed to weed just by being in the neighborhood around 14, um around 14, 15. Around between 15 and 17, I start drinking and picking up the alcohol. I had these issues. It follows me through college. I had a lot of terrible experiences in college, but I had the benefit and beautiful pleasure of going to school because I have a beautiful family. I had a mentor, a sponsor, and it was just a lot of good stuff. My brother was a Catholic priest at the time, so my family had a lot of resources from the Catholic Church, and then they helped sponsor me to go to a Catholic high school. And high school was cool. I was just still smoking weed mostly, not that much problems. The problems didn't really occur till I went to college, and that's when I'm on my own. I got exposed to this freedom, and I just started drinking like a maniac. Totally got kicked out of school my first semester, in which I started modeling, and I guess that was a blessing. I just had to go back home. I went to school, went away to school. I partied, never went to class, nothing. The professors seen me one day. I tried to go to class after 3 weeks of school starting, like it's a joke, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm in class." And they was like, "You don't go to school here no more. You need to get out and you need to go to the registrar office and figure out your life." So I'm like, okay. So I got to go home
Mhm.
and tell my mom, I party too much for some reason. They kicked me out. They're saying that I have to take a semester off in order to get back in. I may have to go to another school, take a class, blah, blah, blah. So I had nothing to do. My mother tells me, Joe, look out that window. That whole world is for you. I was an extremely good looking young kid, right? Extremely, and I was a model, so I went out there. I started modeling. I scored a starring role in So Def Eno's video "Time After Time," which was the remix of the Cyndi Lauper song. I'm the kid in the video on the
Of
bike,
course,
and
I
it's
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, that was me on a bike, and that was me. So that was that
You were?
semester.
I gotta go back and look at that. That was a big hit. I
That
remember
was a
that.
big hit, right? Right.
Damn, Papa.
Yeah, so
Yeah, of course.
I was in the video, and then after that, I went to BMCC, which is downtown Manhattan. I took a course in African American Studies and an English course. I took two courses. I got a B in both, and that was that they allowed me to use those grades to get back into school the following September. Then I left modeling and decided to focus on college and just went straight through college. But longest story short, alcohol kept following me through college. And to fast forward there, because I'm trying to give you guys the CNN version of my story. Fast forward there from college, I get into real estate out of college. I graduate with a bachelor's in business, an associate's degree in management. So I was able to go. My family was already in real estate. I had the gift of gab. I was good with sales and investments. So I went right into real estate. So I went from this no structure college lifestyle, kind of some structure because you have to go to class and stuff, but I went straight into living the real estate life. I made a lot of money fast, had my own brownstone in Brooklyn. I was only like, 24, 25. I graduated with two college degrees at 23. And then I'm on my own and I just, I'm drinking, partying, I'm young, I'm in Brooklyn, I have this brownstone, and I'm living a life. Long story short, from there, every time something
Yeah.
happened, I would default to drinking, and the drinking increasingly just became extremely unmanageable. The meantime, I'm still trying to do music and all of that, but I'm getting a little older, and the law of the real estate and money was pulling me away from the art of the music, and then the alcohol kept getting in the way. And long story short, and because I just really was stuck, and I had a real bad experience around 27. when I experienced a couple of losses, and I just started using alcohol as like a form of self-medication, and it just became totally chronic, and I just couldn't stop drinking. And this was the point when it went from being playful to extremely I felt the disease taking over. I had to get up every day and drink brandy. I couldn't live or function without it. It's trigger warning for anyone. I had to drink beer. Like beer was water, brandy was dinner, cigarettes was just the self medication, and that was my diet. I didn't eat. Every time I would drink, my body would not want food, and I just started becoming this guy who was just drinking 24 hours, 7 days a week. I'll get sick. I'll try to change for a couple days, go right back in. This lasted for literally about 2 years until I hit extreme rock bottom. I got sick. My girlfriend, the people around me that I was partying with, that the band was disbanded. This party house became totally like a flop house, damn near. So let me reset the analogy. I got out of college. I inherit this beautiful brownstone. Everything is fully furnished. I paid for everything. I had all this money, and then towards the end, it was just burnt, totally dilapidated, messed up, just like my life. So my building reflected my state of being. I was totally rock bottom. I wasn't doing music. I couldn't do real estate anymore. I lost all my business connections. And I just had the only thing I had at the time was my girlfriend, who I'm still with today. Thank God she stuck with me. Um, and just, the hope. And when I lost the brownstone, I was just walking through Brooklyn and I was homeless. My girlfriend was sent to Massachusetts to be with her family because I was unmanageable. She had to figure out her stuff. They didn't want us together. And I was just walking through Brooklyn one day and I was just like, trying to sleep on my friend's couch, killing time. I had one friend who was nice enough to say you could crash here. My family didn't really know where I was. I got into too much issues with my family. I couldn't get help anywhere. And it was kind of like, I had some family members like my sister who was always there, but this happened around a time where it was like we had a hurricane in New York. So it was like the Katrina. That was big in New York. The Hurricane Katrina. This is around that
I
time.
remember Katrina.
So it was a lot of family members who was displaced. So it was like I had this addiction. I was roaming around just like in the wilderness, and I got separated and I couldn't really communicate with everybody. I didn't have a phone and I just hit rock bottom. I had no place in anything. So I'm walking one day and it's the morning time. I'm trying to kill time. I'm in the middle of Brooklyn and I just started like literally breaking down. Every step I took, I was like, oh, my body started shaking. I felt like I was going into shock. I was lost. I needed a cigarette. I needed a drink. I had no money. I had no more resources. No one to call. Had no phone. Had like my wallet on me with like one ID, which was like some state ID. It wasn't even like it was like a Medicaid ID. It wasn't even state ID. So I just totally fell off. This is the first time in my life where I lost everything, and I come from a beautiful family, beautiful home. Always had things work out my way. The thing about addiction, you could open but so many doors until you have no more doors to open. Until you like, look, I've
Yeah.
pushed every button I could push. Everyone was done. Everyone was tired, and that was the blessing because it forced me to just really look at my life. And I come from a beautiful family, like I said, Catholic family. We knew God. We was into prayer and faith and stuff. And I just got on my knees one day in the middle of the street, broke down and started crying. I saw someone
Wow.
throw a cigarette and I went for that cigarette. When it hit the floor, I said, "Man, if you pick that damn cigarette up, man, like you're gonna like," because that was just for me. It was a cold winter day. It was dirty outside. It was like cigarette hit the floor. I was going for it. I broke down, started crying, asked God for help, and I just totally surrendered. Like in that moment, I said, "God." And this is the thing. I always was spiritual. I always was conscious. I was Pop. That was me. That never changed. I was always the person people would go to for spiritual help. I always knew all of the information. I was into everything from the Bible to aliens to scriptures to the Tao to meditation. I always was that kid. So I knew enough about faith. But I didn't realize how deep the rabbit hole went when it comes to the darkness. I was always focusing on the spiritual light. I never really had a real taste of what the demonic side looked like, the demons and hell, and what hell on earth really could feel like for an individual. And when I got a taste of that, I literally shattered, broke down, and said, "There's no possible way I could live this life. There's no way this reality I can't take one more step in this reality." So I realized in that moment the addiction wasn't enough to drag me to hell. At some point, I had a fail safe where I was just like, "Nah, I know God, so it's no way I'm taking another step in this reality." I broke down, started crying. So for everybody else in the middle of the street, they're like, "What's this kid sitting here?" Yeah, I'm 20. Well, I'm what, 29, like 29, I think. Like, yeah, 29 going on 30, something like that, somewhere around that range. Right, about 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago. All right. So I'm sitting there and it's like, what is this guy doing? And I'm like, just, to them, I just must have been some guy crying and wailing in the middle of the street on his knees. But to me, I opened up my heart to the universe. I said, "God, I need you. I need all your help. I need your love. I need everything you have. I need everything, every angel, every ancestor, every bit of Jesus, every bit of you, every bit of this mother man, anything you got, every prayer, I threw it all in the universe." And literally, I heard a voice, man. I literally, once the dust cleared, I wiped off the tears and I heard a voice and said, "You have to get on the train and go to the hospital." I jumped the turnstile, went to 14th Street. I found a Catholic hospital that I was familiar with. I was asking everybody, "Is there a Catholic hospital somewhere around here?" "I know it is. It's 14th Street. I know it was." And then I went there and I went
What
into
was
the
the voice like? What was the voice like?
it was literally like through all the crying and the prayers, it just felt like a microphone turned on and it was a third party that said, "You got to get up and you're going to jump the turnstile and you're going to go to 14th Street. You have to go to the hospital." And I said, "Okay."
So it wasn't like a voice that you knew. It wasn't like your father or anything
Nah,
like that.
nah. It was a straight up
Interesting.
supernatural experience. It was as if, like, you see how
Wow.
we're talking right now, is as if your producer mic'd in and
Yeah.
came in and started talking. Like it was another voice that
Wow.
injected that was above everything. It was above my mind. It was just above, and it just gave me instruction. Now, here's the
Chills.
thing. Yeah, and I said that was the revelation. That's the miracle. So when I heard that, I said, "Oh, chills." I'm like, "Yeah, oh." Because I did a lot of work over the
Yeah.
years. I used to pray. I used to meditate. I wrote poems. I wrote books on this. I think the spiritual quest was part of what fueled the addiction almost, because I was always trying to find this higher reality. But it wasn't through the alcohol. You can't. It was endogenous. I was able to actually do it without anything. I never needed anything, right? And my mother tried to warn me of that. She said, "The way you was made, you don't need to drink, so don't even try it." I didn't understand what she was saying. They called me pop because I had so much energy that it would have been abnormal to even offer me a drink. Someone would have said, "Why are you gonna give that kid a drink? He's bad. He's flipping in the air. He's running up and down the block. He's hanging from trees, and he's just, I had all this energy. I was a martial artist." So, they was like, "You're explosive. What are you gonna do? Drinking is just gonna amplify you to the point of you're gonna just spiral out of control." And that's what used to happen. I used to burn out really fast. But long story short, when I heard that voice, it was just a total revelation that faith and God was real to me and that something was working. And I said from that day,
Wow.
I'm not gonna ignore that voice. And I kept listening. So I said, once I get up and if I jump, it said, you're gonna have to jump the train, you're gonna have to get on the train, you're gonna go to 14th Street, you're gonna find a Catholic hospital, and you're gonna stay. And I stayed there. I went to the hospital, I did all of that. Now here's the thing. Before they closed the hospital, I stayed there. I got there probably around 11, 12. I stayed all the way to like 6 or 7. They was closing down the detox unit. And there you go.
Yeah.
Yay. All right.
All right. I'm back. All right.
So
So you were
the
okay.
nurse,
So you were at the
the nurse was like, you might have
okay.
to.
The insurance. Okay.
Yeah. So long story short, I was like, if you send me back out to the street, I'm gonna die. And I broke down again. I'm like, I was going into shock. I was like, I thought I was gonna faint. I said, I cannot leave this place. There's no reality where I'm leaving here and going back in the street. And now I'm in Manhattan. What am I gonna do in Manhattan all day? Right? It's already late. I have no money. I have no food. I'm going in shock. I feel sick. So this nurse is an angel. And you know what? I'll tell you the truth. I cannot find or remember the nurse's name or the doctor's name or the place. Like, it's just like it was so long ago, so much paperwork. I think the hospital and that unit closed. But this lady's an angel. Wherever she's at, may God bless her. She said, this is making me really angry. I'm gonna make some phone calls because you're a good kid. I was praying with her and everything. I had the nurse. I was like, pray with me. We're gonna do it. You got it. I need a miracle. Don't let me go back out there. And she called the director of the hospital down. And this guy gets off the elevator with a cowboy hat on. This old black guy with a cowboy hat. He had all of this jewelry on. You could tell he was distinguished. This guy was super distinguished, man. He was important. You could tell, like, they don't call him down for anything. And she pointed to me,
Yeah.
and she ran to me and she said, Joe, because they didn't call me Bob. My name is Joseph. She was like, Joe, listen, you can't waste this guy's time. He's gonna talk to you. You got to be honest with him. So try your best. You got to convince him. So the guy came to me. He looked at me. He said, kid, what are you doing here? He said, you look so good. What are you doing here? What did you do to get here? I said, I drink too much and I don't want to die. I feel like I'm going to die and I want help. I just need help. If anybody helps me, I promise you I'll do the right thing. I'm just here. And he said, listen, if I help you, will you fly straight? Because I don't want you to waste my time, kid. If I help you, I'm going to be giving you someone else's bed. This is a very important place. People really need the help. A lot of people tell me stories. If I help you, do you promise to fly straight? I looked at that man in his eyes. He looked at me in my eyes. And I said, sir, if you give me a shot, I promise you I'll fly straight. And he said, well, go get your gown. Go to the 3rd floor. Welcome to detox. And that was day 1 of the Sober is Dope story. And the rest is history. The rest is history. That was December 15th, 2012. So this year, December 15th, 2021, I'll make 9 years sober. I never looked back. I did everything I was supposed to do. I went to detox, rehab, learn how to pray again, learn how to meditate, exercise. I did 12 steps. I did therapy. I dealt with my mental health. I did everything. I stayed in rehab for 1 year straight. I never looked back. I slept with inmates. I slept in a 3-quarter house with inmates who was paroled to this drug program. I got into fights and scrapes. I had my fears and my worries. I met good friends, lost friends. I did all of this that year, but I dedicated myself to becoming an expert in regards to my addiction and what alcoholism meant to me and how it was so damaging to me. So I never make the same mistakes again. And I took every avenue and every approach so I could make sure, and I had a guarantee that I would never have to follow that path again with alcoholism.
Yeah. And that first year in recovery, I know, because you don't know much about my story, but I've had a lot of first years. My story is a lot different than yours. So, I mean, my hat is off to you, Mazel Tov for one white chip. But that first year in recovery, when you talk about, because you did it the right way, you took all the suggestions, and that's why you stayed sober. And that first year is so hard. And you're talking about all those things that you did that were so, so hard. And I mean, just sleeping with all those inmates and the other men. But some of them were the worst times in your life. But you have to admit, some of that was the best times of your life,
Right.
Sitting back there, with those guys and just like having some of the best laughs, belly laughs, because you're sober, right?
Right.
That first year, you know what I'm talking
That
about?
first year.
People that are listening and they're like, yeah. I mean, it's scary, but I mean, when I think back to that first year in that sober house with some of those women, and I listen, I'm a little princess. Okay. Like, I don't like to clean. I don't like to do any of that stuff, whatever. It's a cultural thing. Okay. But
Right.
I was sweeping floors and I was like mopping and, I was like, what am I doing? What did my addiction take me to,
Right.
But I look back now and it was like those humbling things and just sitting there in the back in this dingy halfway house with these other women and just like belly laughing, That's
Right. I
fantastic.
remember the funny thing
So,
was I love it. My funny thing was my first day in the 3-quarter house. So after So I go to detox for 5 days, right? And then they sit you down with an exit interview and a counselor. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? So this is that moment where people play, they have the choice to either go all the way or just go back out into the world, right? And I did that many times. I went to detox 3 times before this time, no, twice before this incident. But both times when they asked me did I want to go to rehab, I left. I felt so good. Oh, I'm good. 5 days without alcohol. I'm a brand new person. I got this. I'm going to go cold turkey. I got this. Man, I'll relapse within a matter of a couple of months or maybe weeks, right? This time, it was like the God, the voice, everything, life or death. I said, nah. I sat with the counselor. He said, well, listen, I think the best thing for you to do an outpatient program, but because you're homeless right now, and I wanted that because I could have at that point went back with my family and said, hey, I went to detox. My family, of course, I come from a good family. I have multiple places I could have went, but they just wanted to see me sober. It would have been no question, but I knew that wasn't the answer. So I said, no, I want to go all the way in. And he was like, well, we could put you in this 3-quarter house and then you have to go to this drug program and you have to be drug tested every day. So here's the thing. I hate football. Or at the time, I love football now. At the time, I hated sports. I hated football and I hated Sunday night football. And for the day I left, it was a Sunday when I left detox and they sent me to the shelter. So I go into this room. I don't know what to expect. It's called a 3-quarter house. It wasn't a shelter. It's nice. It's like a nice apartment unit, but you have bunk beds, like 2 bunk beds, 4 people
Yeah.
per room. So I walk in and it's this Jamaican kid on the top where his name is David. Rest in peace, David. David passed away and I love that kid. Then
Oh,
it was my man Peter on the bottom and another guy, what's his name? Andy. He was on and they tough. I mean, the one guy was that stereotypical, strong, kind of like mobster type. He had the tattoos, the slick hair. You could tell he was a gangster in like the 80s. He still combed his hair back. He talked slow. Then the other Jamaican kid looked young and crazy. And then it was like this other dude who was like, he had like a chipped tooth and he was like working. They all looked crazy. I look crazier because I had like a little gray beard because I was born with gray, like I had a gray hair condition from my dad. So I always had a little gray hair, but the addiction amplified it. So I look really young, but I had a gray hair and a gray beard. So I walk in and I look at these guys and they look at me and they go, oh boy. Because you know how the new guy comes in the room and they already got their comfort zone. I look nuts. So they're like, oh my God. I'm like, oh my God. And guess what's on TV? The football game. So I sit down.
football.
Right. I sit down on the bench and I think to God, I'm like, you got a sense of humor. And I look at the football game, and that was the day, the beginning, day one of my rehab. I looked up at my bunk bed, and then I asked him, I'm like, that's my bed. They was like, that's your bed. And I looked at them and I said, I'll see you guys tomorrow. I went to sleep. I climbed up on that bunk bed. That was the greatest night's sleep I ever, 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 ever had in my life. I'm talking about when I woke up that next day, it was as if God restored me all the way back to when I was that altar boy at 12 years old before my dad died. It was like I went all the way back prior to and I just got up, started my day. I said, what do I have to do? They gave me an itinerary. I did everything with flying colors. Went to every meeting, went to every group, never looked back. All became best friends of mine. I love them all. I wonder if some of them, I know one of them is still alive. Don't know about the other guy. And I know David passed away because he had a seizure. But long story short, they was playing football. It was poetic. And hey, I was happy, like you said. And I'm glad I took that step. You know?
You were willing to go to any length at that point, definitely. And my question is, I mean, you're just like, not many people have that, spiritual thing that you have. I mean, a lot of people have to work at it. You're gifted that you just have it in you. Like your mother said, you don't have to use to amplify because you have it in you and you really know how to, you're just, even before you used when you were a kid, you've just always been in touch with your spirituality. Do you still hear that voice that came to you, that told you to go to the hospital? Does that voice come to you?
Yeah. Yeah, not as often. I mean, like I have dark times. It's not as like they're miking in. We had this term in the Catholic world called an elocution. It's like a prayer from the heart or like a voice from the heart, right? So I feel like in my heart
Yeah.
center, I still I know when things are critical, and I immediately get like it feels like I'm downloading what the guidance. Like somehow, if it's there, I know what I need to do and I feel it. I see it in my dreams. So it happens on many levels. Um, I think I never been in a situation where it was that chronic and I broke down and surrendered and opened up that way, because that was pending death. So that's why I was so um magical to experience. It was so supernatural to experience. But now I never jumped out of the connection with that. I kept that connection strong. I pray, I let God know,
Yeah.
because look, I'm not perfect. I'm human. I let God know exactly what's going on. I talk to God.
Right.
God will respond to you. It depends on how if you're quiet enough to listen. Sometime it'll come in, it may not be a vivid voice. Sometime it may just be you might have a dream, you might have a thought. It might come from the heart. You might feel a emotion. It might come through a family member. It might come through a dream of a family member. So God speaks to us in many different ways. But since then, I have heard that voice on some occasions, and it's something I don't take for granted. And that's why I know I made one promise to God that I'm not going to break, just to honor the sanctity of that moment. I'm never going to drink again. I may not be perfect. I don't know what. Like I have issues. Like everyone is not perfect. There's other things in my life I'm working on, but that I'm certain I'm not going to ever break that bond, because that's something that I think would be totally cataclysmic, man, for me if I was to just disgrace the sanctity of that beautiful moment. So to answer
Yeah.
your question, yes, I still hear the voice of God on multiple levels. Um, but I never rang the alarm again
But
like I
maybe
did
not in
that.
an amplified microphone. Right.
Yeah, he didn't check in on
Yeah.
Zoom and be
And
like, yo.
I right. And to me, I look at it to those folks that have a problem, and I'm bringing this up just because everything. I'm self-centered. I'm an alcoholic. I'm self-centered, and I'm thinking of in terms of me and how to help myself because I struggle with it. Listen, I do. Um, I struggle with my constant connection with my higher power. And I'm really into crystals. I'm into energy. I love Reiki. I do meditate. I love it. But everything you're talking about, I get it through just, I guess, like intuition. I don't get. I would love to have God talk to me. Believe me. But I guess I get it more through just like you said, the silence, and then just things coming to me. But then I second guess it, and what I do, Pop, is I'll say to myself, like, no, that wasn't God. That was just my brain. That wasn't God. You know?
Right.
I like it's crazy. It's crazy. It's like, no, Jen, that was God. That was
Yeah,
God.
right. You have
And
to trust. You have to trust. It's not gonna like I give.
yeah.
All right, I didn't share this with anyone, but I'll tell you this. This happened the other day. I was thinking the same thing you were thinking. It was a couple of things in life that wasn't lining up, and I just after the pandemic, lost a lot of people. I was like, I felt detached. I felt lost. And I went to the park and I said, I have this beautiful park by me, and I sat out. It was a beautiful night. I could see all the stars. Now, I had multiple supernatural experiences in my life, but I sat there and I said, God, look, I need a sign. I need a sign. I just want to make sure I didn't lose connection with you. And I just need a sign that things are going to be all right, and that I was really serious, and I stayed out there and I was praying. It was dark. It was like 3 in the morning and I just couldn't sleep. I had this weird allergy that I developed where I'm allergic to perfumes and scents. So I was just going through this, and I was scared to even stay in my house because everything I was allergic to. So I was outside. I like being outside. And I was like praying to God. I asked him for a sign. And I'm just sitting there, I'm praying, I'm walking back and forth, and then I'm looking at the stars and I'm talking to the stars. And then, like, a shooting star came down and across and went towards where
No.
my house was. And I was like, oh, and it was just crazy because it was like, again, something, it was as if, like, I don't know, but it was just like, I knew, I didn't doubt it. I just was like, I'm awake because I asked. I'm gonna wait. It could have been
Huh.
anything. It could have been a square. It just so happened it was monumental like that. It wasn't a normal shooting star. I mean, this thing was big. It came down like pew. Like I was like, what the hell was
Yeah, that was
that?
no normal shooting star. That thing was crazy. Yeah.
I was like, what's
Wow.
that?
Yeah. Oh,
And then
thank you for
and then
sharing that story. Yeah.
yeah, and so what I'm saying to you is it could happen in any way, so just trust yourself. It could come through a poem, it could come through a phone call, it could come through a text message, it could come through a prayer, it could come through sign, whatever. Just just be open to any sign.
So, yeah, it just goes back to that old saying, ask and you shall receive,
Right.
you know? And
Right.
like you say, don't second guess yourself. I mean, I I have I have everything down to like I love my tuning forks.
Oh, you got
I
tuning
just use
for
these for
that's
the
what's
energy.
up.
Just
They good. That's good.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, you should see it in my bedroom. I have Tibetan singing bowls. I have,
Oh
you
man.
know, you don't spirituality, everything you need is right in here, but I mean,
I
I need a little extra help, you know? So I'll
so
open my third eye.
I have the same things. Like I have, like if you go to the Sober's Dope YouTube, we have the Tibetan singing bowls. We do the Saveggio meditations, the tones. We do the mindfulness meditation. I'm into gems. I have gem. I could bring out I have a bunch of gemstones and crystals. I wear them. All of these things. See, this is the thing about spirituality. Because I come from a strict Catholic background. I studied everything and I never closed myself off to any form of faith. I had to learn throughout the years. Like how to use some things is important to
Mm.
realigning your energies. Some things are important to realigning your spirit. Then some things are for mental and mind practices. Some things is to realign your chakra systems and your light energy. All of this stuff is valid. I just think that it's about your intention on how you're using it and your heart, right? If you use it for good and you're using it to better yourself and you're not using it for divination or to seek gain or financial or anything that's dark like that, then there's nothing really wrong with it. I got some hardcore Christian family members who's like, that's satanic. You shouldn't be using crystals and all of that. But I'm like, it came from the
That's what I
earth.
was going to ask you about. Yeah. Mhm.
It came so I just have my own unique spiritual experience, and I don't really get caught up in dogma and what people say. I always been like that. So I was meditating before I even knew what it was. I was always in, because the kung fu and the karate I think is what amplified my spirituality. That always, all of that had me in that whole mind frame. I always was into the Eastern arts and the meditation and stuff like that. But don't
Yeah.
rule out anything. You never know where your blessing is going to come from. You never know where the next lesson is going to come from, and you never know where the next teacher is going to present itself, right? There's many masters around us that could just present themselves, and you might close yourself off by being rigid when you miss the blessing, right? If I didn't go through the
Yeah.
Eastern arts, I don't think I would have had the knowledge to get on my knees and totally surrender. I think it was a culmination of all of the spiritual disciplines that made me know that I could activate this higher seat of consciousness and contact God. I needed help. I had to call God up and say, this is it. But I couldn't ask God, I couldn't say to God, you're going to do this. I had to surrender and say, I'm done. I can't do anything
Yeah.
on my own because I suck. Apparently at this bad. And I suck so bad that I need help. Like almost as if the analogy I use is as if I was captured, like something evil kidnapped me and had me, and I had to call God to rescue me. Like I need you to spiritually rescue me. I cannot. I'm captured, and that darkness, I never want to taste that again. That's something I would not wish. I have a newfound respect for homeless people. I have a newfound respect for the mental illness community, the mental health community. I have a newfound respect for addicts in general because to the normal
Of
person,
course.
it's easy to pass judgment on the addict. It's easy to pass judgment on the homeless. Oh, why they homeless? They don't want to go get a job. Why they ain't listen to their family? You don't know what a person is battling. You don't know what's going on in their spirit. You don't know what type of torment. And listen, we're all one bad decision away from turning on a switch where mental illness could be a real reality for us. You got people that wake up and depression is so chronic,
Oh,
they can't even breathe, right? So I have mercy, and until you've been in the darkness, you don't know how deep the rabbit hole goes. So as humanity, I think we should all be more conscious of what we go through together. And I commend you on your journey, because getting through what you had to go through is serious business, right? Because I mean, alcohol is a hell of a
Yeah.
drug, right?
Yeah.
But crack is too, and all of these other things are too. And
Yeah.
yo, I grew up in the crack epidemic in my neighborhood, and I seen people turn people, family
Mhm.
members that not family members, friends and neighbors that I knew transform overnight. It was just crazy back in the 80s. It was like you could be going to school, your
Mhm.
friend's mother could be taking you to school, and the next day you see her running down the block looking like the Walking Dead, and you like, what happened? And for us, we seen our family and friends turn to like zombie like creatures overnight. So it was like a dark horror movie, because we didn't know what crack was. We just
Yeah.
knew, like, what happened to Richie's mom? What happened to this person? Did you see the guy?
Yeah.
He was running down the block with no shirt on, and and this one got hit by a car, got up and kept running. It was crazy. So the exposure was deep, but I think we just brush it off like that's their problem, and it's our problem. It's humanity's problem.
Yeah. And people love to judge it, and my where I grew up, it was more about the opiates, and I was kind of an exception to the rule, the drug that I liked, but that's because I'm so ADD. I liked cocaine. Like you would be terrible on cocaine, because people that are like us that are hyper and ADD, we
Yeah.
like the stimulants because it calms us down.
Oh,
Stimulants. Anyway, that's talking about. I want to talk about your monk healing website that I love, and then there's a guy. Solomon Hassan that I found on your website talking about homeless
yeah,
guys. This guy had
yeah,
such a message. I friggin' fell
right.
in love with him.
I love
Who
him.
is
He's
he?
the
Like
best.
I fell in love
All
with him.
right.
I think
So Suleiman
yeah, he's
Hassan,
just like he's a guy that he's like just like
he's the
he was
best.
preaching
Yeah,
a message that was like, yeah, I mean, I
yeah.
just you guys have to this guy was great. He's so
Yeah.
opposite of he's just the opposite of me, but he's
He's
just
super
like,
hardcore. He's the drill
dude,
sergeant that you need. He's the addiction drill sergeant. He's gonna come. I am Suleiman Hassan, and one may say, "What is Suleiman?" He comes with that energy, and he's like a real. He's in the streets. He runs a nonprofit called Soldiers for Recovery out of Kensington, Philadelphia, where that's a big drug hub over there. It's like an epicenter over there, and he's out there administering Narcan to people, and he feeds the homeless, and he helps, and he preaches, and he's the real deal. We're all playing our part. His approach is important because he could shock you into your reality. Like, he comes with that energy, like you're gonna like that drill sergeant energy, and I love
yeah,
him. I had to get him on. I admire him deeply. He overcame his addiction. Was crazy. He went on, he got injured and got on opioids, and then get stuck on heroin because it was more cost efficient. And then that just was a recipe for
yes,
disaster.
yeah, and the
And then
oxys,
oxys, which is, we gotta, the government, the pharmaceutical industry, they all have to do better. Should be a lot of reparations made for a lot of good people. I mean, there's people out there, to this day that's dealing with pain management, that's hooked on harder drugs because they made these things outrageously addictive. So yeah, that's my guy. It's a tight community, and yeah, he's part of the Sober is Dope family also, and I'm proud to
listen,
know him.
yeah, there's a very special place in my heart for just the homeless community like you talked about, because I'm going to tell you, that's where I rolled. I mean, I hung out in the hood with homeless people. That's who I used with. That's where I was. And, so that's who I relate to. I mean, it doesn't look like it when you see me, but I mean, anyway, I just loved what he did. I just did. I just loved it. He just had my heart. So, what do you do now? How do you maintain your sobriety? What do you do now? Do you still go to meetings, AA? You sponsor guys?
So
I know you have your podcast. I want you to talk about your podcast, and then
Yeah, so what I do now is to stay
Do it,
sober,
yeah.
I remember the darkness. I don't play around. I sit there and I do the moral inventory and I remind myself of, because listen, when you get a certain amount of time under your belt, you're gonna be extremely empowered. Then you're gonna start playing with the what if bullshit. Like, maybe I can use a little bit, or maybe I could do it differently this time. And it's all bullshit. You can't do anything besides stay sober, because if you try to use, you're gonna implode yet again, or most likely die. It's not a game. And I think people play too much with this. And for me, it's very simple. Do I want to live or do I want to die? Now, there's a lot of ways to have fun and unwind, but drugs and alcohol is just off the table. I can't, right? Now, that's my reality. That's how I stay sober before AA, before any of that other stuff. Remember the darkness. Don't play games. Stay stuck and rooted in reality. You can't play around. Now, yes, I do still utilize AA when needed. I don't need to go to AA every day. So my particular form of healing and recovery is so complete that I do not have to go to meetings every day to maintain my recovery. But that's because I took an extreme all-in approach and I dealt with the root cause of my mental health addiction and everything. That's not advice I'm giving to someone who doesn't have it under control. You may not be pop, so take your butt to meetings if you need meetings. I'm not giving no one an out. I went to meetings religiously for 2 years, 3 times a day before I even thought about, being able to chill, right? So I have different modalities. I
Yeah.
pray, I meditate, I exercise, and I just live a life of service. So the Sober is Dope podcast was my way of giving back, and I wanted to kind of bring the concept of the meeting to the world, the sharing aspect of the meeting. So I said to myself, well, I could probably hit a few 30 people per meeting, but I could hit a few 100,000 per week if I go out there and broadcast the message of recovery, share it, recover out loud, tell the good, bad, and ugly of my story, and stay consistent. I can help a broader amount of people. And some of them AA may not fit, because there's a lot of people who's just like, I can't get with AA right now. They can't, they may be able to later. AA and NA hits people at different stages in their life. For me, it was years. I was like, I ain't going no damn AA. Get out of here with that. People was telling me, but hey, get out of here. It wasn't until I was almost dead until I sat there and I found refuge in the meetings. They said things in the meetings that made all of the little, you know, things in my brain click. It just was like, oh, I get it. It was all written there. So this is what I tell people. If you have a problem with the 12 steps and stuff, look at the literature. Look at the words and the science, the doctor's opinion. Look at what they was talking about. Read it. You may not want to go to a meeting, but you could go on Amazon and buy a big book and just read. Just look at it. Read some of the things. It was in the reading when I was like, I saw the word allergy. And I said, wait a minute. They're saying that it's a possibility that I could be allergic to this? That's a whole different conversation. I'm not crazy now. It's
Yeah.
not just me, right? Maybe there's another million people. I thought there was a point in my life where I thought I was the only person. I was just uniquely this jammed up. And I was special in this way where I had these. No, you're like another 1.8 billion people who probably have an allergy to alcohol. You can't drink, and you was born this way, and there's nothing wrong with you, and you need to seek help, and you need professional help if you're going to get clean. Same thing with drugs. Those dopamine pathways and my dopamine receptors doesn't allow me to play around with addictive substances. I have an addictive brain, so that's it. It was clean. I understood it. So that's why I started
Yeah.
Sober is Dope. I started Sober is Dope to give back. You can find the Sober is Dope podcast on any platform. Google us. We sell clothing through apparel to bring awareness, because we like to have the walking billboard thing. And I tell you this much: you wear a Sober is Dope shirt, people are gonna look at you all day. Like, for some reason, they're just like, "What's that?" They're gonna look, and so I started wearing it for me. Before I even thought about selling it, I just used to make them and wear them. And then I was like, people were like, what's that? And it was an invitation for me to tell my story. And then I started the podcast, right? And then it all came full circle. So my thing is to get the message out there.
It was the clothes first.
Yes. Go ahead. What you were saying?
Oh, no, you cut out. Oh, no, sorry. You cut out for a second. But I was going to say, you got to get a belly shirt. You have to get a Sober's Dope belly shirt. I'm gonna order a Sober's Dope shirt. I didn't see a belly shirt though. I was looking.
We had the belly hoodies, the crop hoodies, but I'll look for a crop belly shirt. I'll hook it up. I'm gonna hook it up. I'm gonna look for you.
Okay.
All right.
Listen, you saw. I'm showing my cleavage here. Got to show the belly. I started the interview saying sex sells. Listen, I'm 51 years old. I work out like a maniac. I'm gonna keep showing it as long as I could. And speaking of it, also. I know, and then we are going to wrap this up, but I could talk to you forever. I mean, you are just like a chock full of information. Chock full. You also are big on the ketogenic diet too.
Well, yeah. So I'm ketogenic, plant-based. It all goes hand in hand. We could talk about that all day. But like one of the benefits of quitting alcohol is you want to eat as much as you want. That created kind of like a pre-diabetic environment for me about 4 years into my recovery. And I just didn't.
Yeah, I heard you did a whole podcast on it. I couldn't stop listening to it.
Yeah, and I was just like, nah, I remember my grandma losing her toes and all of that, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with diabetes in my family because we predisposed to it. Mainly because what I understood was in Africa, they did this thing called an African study where it was like there was a lot of Africans who barely ate meat and barely ate a lot of sugar, and it was no forms of noticeable diabetes, no form of heart disease. Like the study was so groundbreaking that when they did autopsies on all of these people, they realized that it was unheard of in ancient Africa that people would even have heart disease or diabetes or die of these things. So I realized the SAD diet, the standard American diet, is what generates these heart disease and diabetes and stuff. And the problem is sugar. On a molecular level, sugar is a few molecules away from crack cocaine. And it's that addictive, right? So when I was like, okay, I have to put sugar in my perspective. And then imagine how I felt that being black, the stereotype of diabetes and blacks and we're prone and predisposed. I was like, that's bullshit, because when they did the studies, we never even had it in our DNA profile. It was like unheard of because we didn't eat a lot of meat. We was eating a lot of vegetables, and we wasn't eating a lot of processed foods. So I realized, just to go back now, look, now it's not about a black and white thing. Follow me for a minute. The China study, which they call, this is the famous study you're going to always hear about anything diabetes related. The China study and the Ghana study. That's what they base all the diabetic information on for everyone. So when you're looking into the ketogenic diet and why, they're basing it on the science of the China study, which is where all of this information that I got from my African DNA and because they study Chinese and African people, right? And they said based on their diet, it was unheard of that they was getting these diabetes and stuff like that. So I tell everybody, go back to a natural diet, make the base of your diet plant-based, and try to reduce sugar consumption as much as possible. And the way you do that is by increasing your healthy fats and your fiber, your vegetables, which will create enough what they call, you will be full or more satiated and less prone to seek energy from your brain through glucose and sugar, because that's fast energy, hence fast food, right? So it's all connected. And I was able to reverse my pre-diabetes.
Yeah. We could, you know what? I know I could do a whole, I'm going to invite you back because I could do a whole show on this.
Yeah.
Because I'm so into food, diet. That all entails with my eating disorder too. So anyway,
okay.
All right. One more thing that we didn't cover, and this is
took death out the mouth for Lucy.
This is your new song, right?
Lucy's crash. The hoopty poppy was bougie. Went from the side of the Uzi. Daddy was loose B. Lincoln Continental with smooth color of rubies. No more Henny. Cardi spoke with the Marley. Dipped in the Dolly. Image of pharaohs deep in the starry skies. Deep in his eyes. He rides through with the army. Resurrected soul of Panthers black in the onyx. Politics with ancients and those stuck in the bondage, and hoes stripping they clothes with wolves stuck in the mountains. Consciousness came from the soul, smite all the demons, conquered the old spirit, the devil snipe him and leave him. Got love from the spirit of Uma, mastered the Luna, sacred and blessed, swam with the sharks, never the tuna. Poppy put the faith in his chest, hated the Ruger, killing people never felt right, fight for the Cougar. Old school analog rap before Pro Tools. Nuts put the love into logic and make soul food. Boom bap rapping till death part with the soulful. Coon rap smacking the death black in the vocals.
Ah, that's love. Thank you.
Man,
That's
I love
love.
it. That's new, right?
Yeah, that's new. So I dropped 3
Oh,
new
of course.
I dropped 3 new singles. That one, Off the Grid, and Dear Addicts. But Dear Addicts, we're gonna launch that. That's a big campaign. That's a letter that I wrote to all the addicts, and that was me trying to incorporate. Hey, I want to incorporate this with my music with the recovery. So if I have the platform, I might as well use it to shift the message. So that song was about transformation, going from the darkness back into the light, and no more Henny, Bacardi, smoke with the Marleys, dip. All of that was just me transforming.
I love it.
I love it.
So
too.
when is the whole thing going to launch? I couldn't find the other song. Is it on Spotify?
It's all on
Is it on Spotify? I couldn't find the Addicts song.
It's when you go on Spotify, Dear Addicts, it's under that. So the way they was released, they was all launched at the same time, but they released them. So Dear Addicts seemed like it came out before Transformation P, but they was all launched on the same time. So you just got to look under it. I also dropped the album 3 months ago called Ancestral Drums. So I'm just accelerating the music and really getting it out there because it's really interesting to me, and I want to. Look, I'll leave it here. Addiction tried to take away my passion to create art, and I'm not going to let that happen, even at 41 years old. So I said, you know what? I'm sober. Why am I not doing music? I know I'm older than the average rapper, but so what? I'm still good. I'm not going to let addiction take anything else away from me, and that's why I started doing my music again. Don't let addiction rob you of your joy and creativity. Boom. Pop Buchanan, sober is dope. You heard it from the best.
Yeah, and that's the shit, man. Don't stop doing your music, man. Seriously, thank you. Sober Exposure, I'm having you back. And we're going to talk more about the music. Thank you, Poppy.
Right. Thank you so much. God bless. God bless you. Thanks for having me. I love you guys.
Need more? Of course you do. The show's all about needing more. Go to my website at soberexposure.show or get stuck on my Instagram at soberexposure_podcast.